You might wonder why I've been making all these cuts in this assembled box. But because the miter joints on this box are just glued, they're not secured in any kind of mechanical way at all. I've made these cuts for the use of what are called miter keys. The miter keys can be decorative, but they also provide lasting strength to the joint. I made these cuts using a miter key sled. This is a very simple piece of equipment that you can make yourself. If you look at it, it's very simply made. It's two pieces of hardwood. This particular wood is maple. It has a butt joint that is glued, and then I used a brad nailer to shoot nails into it to secure it, then flattened one edge so that it has a nice secure place to ride against the table saw surface. This serves as a runner. It also holds this in exactly a 90-degree position as it passes across the table saw. And you can see at this end, the runner is secured to the cradle just using screws. And so this is really designed for making larger boxes because it provides a very secure platform for balancing the box at a 45-degree angle. I've also prepared a similar, smaller version of the walnut box made of maple. It's made exactly the same, but without a top. And then I'll just roll it up. And because it's so small, I was able to secure it during glue up with large rubber bands. I want to add miter keys to the top to give them structural strength as well. I could do it using this miter key sled, or I can make this jig very quickly. It serves the same purpose, but it's really designed for making small boxes rather than the large ones. And it's made from scraps just lying around the shop. So with my piece of scrap 2x4, I want to make sure that it's all straight and square. If it isn't, I want to square it up. Now when I make a cut on it, part of it gets flipped over, so it has to be parallel on both sides, so the next thing will be to run it through the planer so it's even thickness on all parts. So the next thing will be to just make a cut just along one edge so it's all square on all sides. So at this point all I need to do is make a through cut at 45 degrees. So that and a piece of plywood becomes the foundation for my jig. I'll put another screw in. I'm careful in putting the screws in that I'm not screwing where I'm going to have a saw cut. There. Okay. Make sure that's flush. You need to make sure that the screws are countersunk because the screw head standing out would make your jig inaccurate. So that should be enough to carry the box safely across the blades. Before I use it, I'll cut it to length. I'm going to make my miter keys in the side of this box so that one cuts in deeper and then this one down here will cut in just a little bit lower. And the purpose of that is to create kind of a visual tension in the side of the box. So the first thing I want to do is lower the blade. I don't want it to protrude into the inside of the box, so I'm lowering it down to what I consider to be a reasonable height. So that will be the height of the cut for the first set of keys at the top of the box. You can see pretty much where the box top is going to rest because you can see this plywood surface on here. But you can see the placement of the key. It's about 1/4 inch from the top right now. I'm going to move it just a little closer. So there we go. I'll set my box in the jig. So there are my first ones. For the next step, by observing the jig, I can see where my next miter key will go. But what I can't see is the depth. Now there's no magic formula for this. This is a thing that you would probably best discover from your own experience, what you like, what seems to work for you. And now I'm ready for that next cut. Now, one of the disadvantages of this jig is that every time you change the position, you can see that the cut changes, and after a while, this will no longer be useful or accurate. But this thing is so easy to make that after you've made a few boxes of different designs, you can throw this one away and make a brand new one. We have our glued up box now, and I'm going to start planning where my miter keys will fit. So before I do anything, I want to just take a piece of wood, and I've got it lined up with the front, I've got it marked on the bottom of the box, and now I can begin planning. I know, for instance, that my saw kerf that holds the lid in place is right in there, so I don't want to do anything that's going to interfere with that. So I'll place my first one right there. I'll mark on both sides approximately where it's going to go. I'm going to do something similar down here at the bottom so that I'll have a balance there. Later, we'll cut the lid from the base, and so I want to make a decision where my lid is going to go. And I'm going to place my lid right in there. So that gives a lid of that size and a base of that size. I'm going to put another miter key right there so that there'll be two securing the top. And then on the opposite side of this, and balanced, I'll put a miter key there. And now I'm going to choose someplace right in there. So that becomes my tool for laying out the position of the stop blocks on my miter key sled. I'm going to mark, I know that this will be the top side. I'm going to place this down in here, and I'm going to cut it to length. One of the nice things about this particular jig is that the blade goes through at the same place every time a cut is made, so that keeps the cut from getting wider and wider. Now this piece certainly reflects the box itself, and so I'll be able to use this to set up stop blocks on this side or over on this side. So I'm going to start with this end, and I'll place a stop block here to control the position of the cut. Use a C-clamp to lock it in place. So now, if I place my box there, you can see this, this cradle holds a large box pretty firmly. I push it through, and pull it back, rotate it, feel that it's real well seated in the cradle, push it forward, pull it back. It can still wiggle in there, so you have to put a little pressure down in the same direction throughout the cut. With a little glue and a little bit of tapping, that'll go nicely in place. Okay, so now I'm moving my little guide piece over, and that will be the center cut. Okay, now the next one. I'm going to make my miter keys out of the same pecan that I used for making the top panel. I'm going to cut it to the required width to fit in there, and then I'm going to rip 1/8-inch thick pieces of wood to fit in the key slots. So I'll start by adjusting the space between the blade and the fence at 1/8 of an inch, and I may have to fine-tune it a little bit to get a perfect thickness. I like it when things fit just right the first time. This is a very simple sled that I use for cutting mitered pieces, and it's particularly good for cutting very thin stock. And you can see that I can put a piece on there, raise the height of the saw just the right amount. And this is made like my other sleds. It just has simple runners on the underside on a piece of plywood, and the runners are screwed in place with a simple framework to hold the stock. So I'm going to make these miter keys. So you see, by holding it down like that, I can keep moving them clear out of the way, clear of the blade. You'll notice with this jig I don't even have to measure. I just position it so that I can see where the blade's going to cut, hold it down and push it forward. I need 20 of them, so I still have a little ways to go. If you're in a hurry and don't want to make one of these sleds, even though I highly recommend this sled because you'll find all kinds of uses for it, you can cut these square and then just sand them off or cut them off after the box is assembled. So I have a pile of miter keys that I've cut. These are pecan and they'll match the lid. And you can see sometimes they go right in and sometimes there'll be a little bit of a, oh, that's not bad, I like that, okay. And when they go in like that, you don't have to do anything to them but glue them. So I'm going to make a little puddle of glue, and I also have a little glue bottle right here that I'm going to use to put a little bit in the slot before I put the glue. I'll just put a little bit in there as the miter key goes in place. And you can kind of feel when it seats, they sometimes even make a little noise when they hit bottom. Putting a little bit in there, it allows me to make sure that it gets plenty. And then dipping it in the glue gives me a chance to kind of make sure that all the surfaces are covered. And I'm going to show you now the fitting of the next ones, because undoubtedly I'll find some that are too tight, like that one. It's too tight. So I'm going to put it down on the workbench, and just not enough to really totally crush the fibers, but enough to feel that I can get it in there without having to hammer on the box itself. So here we go. Put a little glue in there, spread a little bit more here. Again, it's too tight. These things don't go together all that quickly, you know. There's time involved in it, but if you think about how long a box like this can last, you know, it's worth the investment. The depth of the cut is intended not to go all the way through the sides of the box. Now, there are occasions when you might want to make the depth of the cut go all the way through. For example, you might want to insert a key that would have a double purpose of supporting a tray inside the box. Okay. Well, maybe a little ta-da is in order. Ready for sanding in about an hour and a half. I'm checking some of my miter keys to see how they fit. And this is taking a little too much pressure, so I'm going to put it aside and I'm going to hammer on it a little bit so that I don't have to hammer on the sides of my box. This walnut's going to take a little more hammering than the pecan because this walnut is very hard wood. So even though this compresses the fibers, one of the things that happens when it gets glue on it is they tend to expand again. That moisture will make the wood fibers swell up and lock them in place. push them tight. Okay. Since these are at different heights, I can't really stand the box on an edge while they go in, so we'll have to do the rest of them like this. You can tell when they really bottom out, you can just see that little bit of glue squeeze out, and that's a very good sign. Okay. Okay. I let these keys dry about an hour and a half also. Now I'll use this little Japanese Dozuki saw to trim them before I hand sand them flush with the sides. I'm going to do that right now. I don't want to cut too close where I'll mark the sides of the box, but if I cut through these first two, then they'll guide my saw for the next two. So you can see that doesn't take very long to do. I'll make my same cut on these. Okay, this is a piece of 120 grit sandpaper. I'm going to try not to roll it down on the flat of that side. I'm just going to try to, you can kind of feel the difference, you know, whether it's touching back there or whether it's touching on the front edge. So the object here is to just let you know what to do if you don't have the more expensive equipment, and some people don't even want to buy the more expensive equipment. Piece of sandpaper like this, you can work on the kitchen table without spreading dust all over the house. And this is no messier than rolling out some pizza dough. I know craftsmen that have used chisels to do this same thing. And the problem that I've had with that is that sometimes you can tear off a little piece of a corner if you're not real careful. And the sanding, I've never had that problem. So let me just, before I do the final sanding on this box, I want to chamfer the edges right around the bottom. That will give it just a little bit of definition so that it looks like it's a separate object from whatever it sits on. So I'm going to use this chamfering bit in the router table. It cuts a 45-degree angle. I just line the box up, and looking from this angle, I can see how much of the chamfer I'm going to take off. The other thing I wanted to check was just the alignment of the roller with the fence. So that's pretty close. I'm just going to go ahead. Will be a very attractive edge. I'll just take a block of wood, wrap it with sandpaper, and just hit those edges after I do the orbital sanding on the rest of it. Maple is one of the hardest woods to sand because any cross-grain sanding marks will show up. So I'm going to hit these edges very lightly. I'm going to count my strokes so I know what I'm doing on each edge. Okay, now these bottom, these chamfers. That was 10, wasn't it? I want to take the crispness off of that inside edge, so I'll just do that. You don't want it to feel sharp when you touch it. So that's ready for a lid. I'm going to sand the miter keys flush with the sides of the box, so I'll use a 6x48-inch stationary belt sander. I'm going to turn on my dust collection. I've got it at this angle just because you can see that it's easier for me to hold. This is a very natural position. And it's also close to me if I want to check quickly. It puts things right in my line of vision to see how effective a job I'm doing. I have a 120 grit belt on the sander. You'll notice I keep flipping from one side to the other. And the purpose of that is it gives me a chance to check visually to see how I'm doing. It also keeps me from putting too much pressure on one point or another. So now I'm going to sand the bottom. This, like all the boxes, needs to be sanded on the Orbital sander. So I have 180 grit in the sander. I'll move through 240 and 320. I'm ready to cut the lid from the base of this box. So, first thing I'm going to do is I want to check my blade height because it's very important that I not cut all the way through. I want to make sure that I'm leaving a little bit there to hold everything in position. Now, you may remember this stick from a little earlier. I saved it, and I'm marked on there where that cut is going to be. You remember when I was planning these things out, I forgot to allow for the thickness of the lid. So I'm going to go back this other way. I'm not going to rely totally on that, however. I'm going to make an observation here of how that fits between these two keys. And my best judgment is that's pretty close. After I make the cut, I'm going to see if I can poke through with this knife. And this knife is going to tell me whether I need to adjust the blade up or blade down. See, I can't poke through there without putting a lot of pressure on it. So that tells me that I need to raise the blade up very slightly, which I just did. Now, if I didn't leave that little webbing in there, the thing that would happen would be the lid would push into the blade at the close of the cut, and it would pinch on the blade, and it wouldn't ruin the box, but it would give me a lot of extra sanding to do. So now I'm ready to finish the cut all the way around. This is a really fun part of the box making process. I love it because you make this cut and suddenly this thing is just like an amorphous kind of, it's a solid thing. You can't figure out how to get into it. Suddenly you can just open it and it becomes a box. So even though I've tried my best to adjust the height of the blade, I was careful there not to exert a tremendous amount of force against the fence, just in case in cutting this, I had been just a little bit, in my sanding, if I had sanded one side a little too heavily, it would make a difference on the height of the blade into the stock. I'm just making cuts. And the closer you can get, you know, there'll be a little bit of sanding time on this still to deal with this little edge. Most of it I can just push over. Now I'll put this down on the sheet of sandpaper. Now if I needed a little bit of walnut sanding dust to repair something, this would be a good time to collect it. Because I can just take my sandpaper, collect it in a little pile, and then by mixing a little bit of glue with that, I could make my own wood filler. So now I'll do the base. I'm going to do a chamfered edge on the bottom of the box. The purpose of the chamfer is just simply to create a shadow line around the box that tells you that it's a separate object. It's not something that is built into the table it rests on. So I'm going to hand sand the chamfer a little bit. Now I'm going to do the same thing here very lightly at the top. I'm going to just do 3 strokes on each edge. I'm going to do the same thing on the lid. This is just to create a slight definition between the lid and the base. And then I'll do a slight chamfer on each of the edges using the sanding block. Okay, now this box is ready for finishing. I have a piece of spalted pecan, and I'm going to use this for the lid of my little maple box. I want my lid to fit within the confines of this box, so I'm going to make my lid 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Now I'm going to route the edges so it will set down inside so it will be in one spot. That's loose enough that it fits every way but still holds itself in a pretty nice relationship with the box sides. Now we sand it. There's certainly a number of ways in which you can finish the lid. You could route it to some profile if you want. You can just do a light chamfer if you want. You could go more ornate with it and do a Roman ogee, do a round over, and in that case you'd probably also want to do a round over on the bottom edge. I think we'll keep this a light chamfer, and then I'll use the same kind of attention to detail when I make a pull for the top.